How's it going, everybody, and welcome to this Thursday edition of the Star Local Media High School Sports Podcast. I am Taylor Ragland. I do sports for Plano, Allen, and Lake Cities, and I will once again be your host in Matt Welch's absence. He'll be back next week, resuming his duties from the middle chair, but for today you have the three of us. Once again, the same crew as the Monday podcast. I'm joined by Brian Murphy, who does sports for Frisco, Prosper, Little Elm, Salina, correct? Awesome. I'm going to get these down one day. And Justin Thomas, who does Coppell, The Colony, Carrollton, Louisville, and Flower Mound, correct. I believe. So Monday we talked about District 4-5A Division I, district that we didn't have that many teams that we actually officially covered on a day-to-day basis, but the opposite will be true today, as I believe all of District 5-5A Division I, which we will be going over today, is covered by at least one of us. So that district contains Frisco Lone Star, Frisco Wakeland, Frisco Centennial, Frisco Independence, Frisco Heritage, Frisco Liberty, The Colony, and Little Elm. So almost an all Frisco district with a couple of outliers that JT can attest to as well. So I guess without further ado, let's get into some of the teams and storylines before our commercial break. And then after, we'll come back for our standings and some games to watch. So I guess we'll turn it over to Mr. Frisco over here to kick things off, however you want to.
I kind of want to say something at the start, just kind of a little background that, you know, this district is put together, but these teams are really kind of familiar with each other. Before the 2 years that the Colony and Little Elm were in 14-5A, they were lumped in with the Frisco schools for 4 years in a row. So.
Right. I mean, it makes a lot of sense geographically to put them all together. If you're not going to have an entirely Frisco district for whatever reason, then I mean, the Colony and Little Elm are pretty much candidate 1 and 2 to be lumped in, at least, you know, just based on distance. So
yeah, definitely travel-wise and stadium and all that stuff, lots of experience between these programs. So
yeah, for sure. So I guess now we'll turn it over to to Mr. Frisco over here.
Why am I here? I've never seen any of these teams play ever. I know nothing about this district. It's Monday's podcast all over again. No, I mean I'm pretty familiar, to say the least, with all these teams. Lone Star is safe to say the favorite. They're the number 5 ranked team according to Dave Campbell's way too early preseason rankings.
Right. Yeah.
Despite losing their quarterback, losing their top running back, losing the best linebacker probably in the 5A in the area.
That was going to be my question about, just immediately coming in and kind of familiarizing myself with this district and looking at Lone Star. They're the consensus pick, I think, to win the district championship, but they've lost so much. So what is it about, Lone Star that's going to allow them to, I guess, re-rack and keep rolling?
They still return a lot. Darren Smith and Marvin Mims are 2 guys that could win district MVP in this district. Marvin Mims was newcomer of the year, had over 1,200 receiving yards, 12 touchdowns. Darren Smith won that same award as a sophomore 2 years ago. He's now a senior. He doesn't have to worry about Kirby Bennett, stealing all of his touches and hurdling over defenders left and right. It's now his offense. The big question mark is, though, who's going to be the quarterback? There's a quarterback battle going into the first week of practice of camp next week between Grant Hardy, who's the JV quarterback and a baseball stud at Lone Star, and Julian Larry, a guy that started every game at cornerback last year. He's also a starting guard on the varsity basketball team as a sophomore last year. So those 2 guys, Julian Larry, both guys really athletic. I was going to say Julian Larry's very athletic, but both guys multi-sport athletes.
Right.
Who's going to separate themselves in these next coming weeks. But, they still return 13 guys.
Second most,
13 returning starters, I should say.
Second most in the district. I think Little Elm had 14. I think that was the most in the district. But the Colony and Lone Star had 13. So
yeah, and they have a winning tradition at Lone Star.
Right.
Coach Rayburn, he's one of the top coaches in the state of Texas. They've won 3 consecutive district titles with 2 different quarterbacks. Granted, they're both Division I talent quarterbacks, in Jason Shelley and MJ Rivers. But I think they have enough talent in other places to really make some noise in the district. They also returned Trey Taylor at cornerback. He was an all-state cornerback in the secondary as well. So it's not like they lose Nick Bolton, they lose Kirby Bennett, they lose MJ Rivers, they lose these guys, but they still have Division I talent all over on both sides of the ball, on top of great coaching.
Right. I guess from there, like we said, that's kind of the consensus. It seems like number 1. Hey, you got, I think, 4 or 5 more Frisco schools. So if you want to lump some together, or
slow me down whenever. I need to catch my breath at some point.
Get rolling.
So another team that made the playoffs last year that's going to have a new quarterback is Wakeland. I think they had somewhere upwards of 7 key injuries going into the playoffs last year before they got pummeled by Prosper. Coach Marty Secord told me, they literally limped into that game. He wasn't making excuses, but they were without their best defensive player in Adam White. They were without other guys in the secondary. They just had other injuries on offense as well. Now they lose their quarterback, who Dylan Cadwallader, who transfers to Prestonwood. They lose Easton Reeves, who transfers to Prestonwood. And so they have a new quarterback as well. It's looking like it's going to be Dylan Liable, who was on the JV last year, and Coach Marty Secord was impressed with him and the fact that he has experience at quarterback. He's not some guy that has just been waiting in the wings, just sitting, not getting playing time. He has a lot of experience, granted on the JV level,
right?
But they're looking for him to step up at the varsity level. And then you get Adam White back, who's getting a lot of looks from Division I schools. He tore his ACL in the very first game last year against Liberty, Week 1, because Frisco does that weird deal, or they did the previous 2 years where they do a district game in Week 1. Thank God they're not doing that this year. But
they start quadruple header or something, wasn't it?
They did that 2 years ago at the Star.
Wow.
That was my first week working here. And I walked in the Star and I was like, what the heck?
See, you should have been smart like me and started in February.
No, I started the second to last week of August.
Right.
I knew there was like Frisco Centennial, Frisco High. No idea there was, Lone Star, Liberty, on and on and on and on and on. But yeah, that was a fun fact. That was my first week. But yeah, so they started the week off in a district game against Liberty, tore his ACL. So there's really no film on Adam White, but Coach Marty Secord told me he's the leader of that defense. He's still piling in Division I offers, and he expects him to get even more as the season goes along.
Right. I guess we can switch gears maybe to the Colony and let Brian catch his breath for a second. The Colony, another team that projected to finish at the top of the standings. Maybe if not for Lone Star, a lot of people would have them, winning the district title. And there's an outside chance that they could get there. I mean, if one head-to-head game. Sometimes in football, unlike other sports, you play a team once, and if Lone Star has an off night or somebody gets hurt, then all sorts of crazy stuff can happen. But what do you see out of the Cougars, JT?
I really like the look of this team. They just seem to get more consistent, take the next step kind of pretty consistently under Rudy Rangel. They're going for a 6th straight playoff berth, so 3 of those came in this Frisco district before the 2 years in a row in 14-5A. So they're on a nice little run. I really like what this team how they shape up. They have 13 players back. Not really super, I guess you would say young, but experienced, I guess you could say. So a lot of young talent that's really taking the next step forward, and it starts with Mikey Harrington.
Right.
He was sophomore last year, wasn't expected to be the starter, but Jamel Jones gets injured before the season even starts. Harrington comes right in, leads the Colony back to the playoffs, maybe surprise people a little bit. I mean, 67% completion percentage, 1,600 yards, 21 touchdowns, just 8 interceptions for his
newcomer of the year, right?
Newcomer of the year.
I don't want to play the what-if game, but how good would the Colony have been if Jamel Jones never got hurt?
That's a good question.
For the playoff or for the district round?
I mean, it's definitely possible because as good as Harrington was, Jones definitely brought a different dynamic with his legs that Harrington just doesn't have. So that would have, it would have changed scheme a little bit and everything. So it's really tough to say. But you can't say enough about how Harrington did perform. Pretty unexpectedly having to get thrust right in there. Didn't really go through the spring last year as the starter. It was Jones. He got injured in the summer, so he had to come right in into the fall. But really took off right there. And he's got 2 guys behind him that I think might be one of the best backfields in the state, to be honest.
Right.
Senior Jaden Abdallah and Junior Miles Price, they're, ground and pound, whatever, smash and dash, however you want to put them. But, Abdallah's a little more physical, but he had 959 yards and 11 touchdowns last year. And then Price is a little more electric, I would say, but he had 1,718 yards, 8 touchdowns.
Wow.
And, Coach Rangel says they're going to try to look to incorporate him in the passing game even a little more this year, too. So with those 2 guys, really talented backfield.
It says Price runs a 4.40, and usually that's a little fabricated. Coaches will be like, all right, well, take down 2 ticks here. Yeah. I actually believe it. Miles Price, I saw him play against Little Elm last year.
And you can see some clips on
awesome.
Twitter and YouTube and stuff. Yeah, and he's pretty dynamic.
That was just one of my notes for the Colony in general, kind of looking at them. It's usually when you hear the term, running back by committee, or, they're going to have a pair of guys in the backfield, it's because they don't necessarily have a true starter or a guy that could be a true starter, but it seems like they have 2 true starters, which is,
absolutely. Another guy I'm excited about on their offense is Keith Miller. He was an all-district tight end last year as a sophomore, but he's going to be more of a wide receiver this year. Really good size, really athletic. He had 5 touchdowns on probably 250 yards, 17 catches last year, but he was as a tight end last year. with Andrew Nelson and Antonio De La Cruz graduating. They're going to move him to wide receiver, and Coach Rangel has real high aspirations for him. And then they have a host of other players behind him that could contribute at receiver, like David Perkins, Benji Nelson, Kyle Taylor is another sophomore that's really athletic that they're excited about. So I guess the biggest question is going to come on the offensive line from them, how they're going to gel. You know, they have some guys to replace there, and Jack McCollum kind of leads the way, but they're going to have to kind of develop on the offensive line there a little bit.
You think there's any way that they kind of take over and potentially steal a district title from Lone Star? Or you think they're not quite there?
We'll get to our predictions here after the break, so we don't want to spoil anything. But let's just say, as excited as I am about the offense, I think the defense is going to be really good too, and they are loaded in the secondary. You mentioned Price. Senior Calvin Baker, I think he's an all-state selection, and Dave Campbell. They had him listed as a linebacker. He's actually a safety. I believe he's going to play safety again this year. But between them and Cameron Pear, who was the district's newcomer 2 years ago, and he's back as a senior. So between those three guys, Cameron Sargent and Quinn Palin, they're loaded in the secondary. I guess the big question there coming into the kind of spring was what's going to shape up at linebacker, but Rangel came out more than pleased. No longer questions there after seeing what Dom Fuentes and Chris Allen did. And then, of course, you got Ryan Mora and Marcus Moore leading the way in the trenches, two standout all-district players there, along with Quavon Mathis. So questions about linebacker going into the spring, but it doesn't sound like there's too many questions defensively for the Cougars heading into the fall.
Right. Well, I guess we'll maybe stay outside of Frisco and give you a little bit of more of a break from the Frisco schools and go to Little Elm. So, you know, the Colony and Lone Star each bringing back 13, Little Elm bringing back, you know, one more starter with 14 and you know, one of the more veteran heavy teams in the district, obviously. So what do you see out of them, Brian?
Little Elm was in the same district with Frisco and the Colony in 2014 and 2015. Mm-hmm. Little Elm won one game in those 2 seasons combined, and it was against Independence, who was in its first season ever with no seniors. So it was kind of expected there. But this is such a different Little Elm team. They returned 14 starters, the most in the district. They're the only team in the district to have a 3-year starter at quarterback. And Logan Kohler, he's awesome. He's an Oklahoma
cadet. That can be
baseball.
huge for sure.
Every time I bring up Oklahoma something, Matt's always here, and Matt's just I'm so glad he's not here right now, because anytime Oklahoma gets
we can move on instead of having to stop down for Sooner Talk.
Yes, but I just stopped and did it for him. They have a really good offensive line led by Elias De Leon, who's a 3-year starter as well. They have another 3-year starter on the defensive side of the ball who they expect to use on offense in Brandon Crossley. He's expected to make his announcement tomorrow, actually. If we're airing this Thursday and the night, so yeah, it'll come out Friday the 10th. He tweeted that, I think, 2 days ago. He's either going to pick between Texas Tech, SMU, or TCU. He's just got a ton of offers.
Pretty good choices.
Yeah, so he's staying here locally as well. He's a cornerback. He's a kick returner. Coach Kendrick Brown told me they're going to use him as a, you know, running back, slot receiver type deal. He's super fast, track star, starts on the basketball team.
Athlete.
Just the
pure athlete.
Best athlete in the school. No question about it. And then, you know, they have some other guys.
RJ may have something to say about that.
RJ's the best basketball player. He's the best at what he does.
There you go.
Brandon Crossley is the best. He's the most gifted athletically. Like, you can just plug him in a sport, and he could, you know, probably start on the varsity team. You know, like, throw him on the soccer team. Well, I don't know how good his soccer is, but he could probably outrun some guys.
Just dig yourself a deeper hole. Just come on, we're just going to let you do it.
I'm about to get a bunch of emails. The Brandon Crossley family, or the Crossley family, is going to give me some calls tonight. Oh, you're awesome. And then RJ's dad is going to hit me up and be like, what are you doing? No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, so, you know, then they return a bunch of other guys. Will Harris, who transferred from Hebron 2 years ago, he's another starter on the basketball team, big 6'5" receiver. He's going to take over after Kevin Terry graduated. He's off to Texas Tech. But yeah, this isn't your mama's Little Elm football team. I expect them to make the playoffs. I expect them to. Well, I'll get into that.
There you go.
I'll cut
teaser
myself off right there.
I guess from there we'll move into your other Frisco schools.
Another team that I think, you know, can knock on the door for a playoff spot. They haven't made the playoffs since 2014. Is Frisco Heritage. You know, a lot of people, you know, and Dave Campbell's and other outlets and stuff are kind of really overlooking them. They graduated Amari Jones, who missed half the year last year. I'm sure you all know who he is. He's now running back at Tulane, freshman. He was a quarterback making the move to running back, and he's just one of those guys like Brandon Crossley, just a freak athlete, you know, best athlete at the school kind of deal. So question marks were there, you know, who's going to be the quarterback. Matt Sanders, who played a little bit of time at quarterback last year for Heritage, was a sophomore. He is at Memorial. You know, a lot of kids from Heritage, Lone Star, and Wakeland got zoned and busted at Memorial if you're sophomores and juniors. So he's at Memorial. So then, who's going to be the quarterback? Well, Heritage has a new quarterback and an honorable mention all-state guy from Class 4A, and Jason Falkenberry, who played at Godley last year, posted, I don't have his numbers in front of me, but it was something ridiculous, almost 4,000 yards.
Yeah, I saw those.
Just, outrageous. They have a new head coach from Whitney, 3A program, in Kenneth Gilchrist. They had the luxury of starting practice a week early.
Right.
Gilchrist hadn't even moved to Frisco yet. He had taken the job in February, but he hadn't moved until June.
Right.
So, there was no point in doing spring ball. He couldn't implement his system. He couldn't get the kids to buy in spring. So they didn't do spring ball. So they started this week already. They said they brought even, I actually met with them yesterday, and they said they brought the freshmen up to varsity for the first couple days just to give them a taste of what their philosophies are and whatnot.
Right.
So with that addition of Gilchrist, with the addition of Jason Falkenberry, pro-style quarterback, 6'3", everything you want in a prototypical pocket passer. I think they can maybe make some noise for a playoff spot. We'll get into that in the next segment.
As an aside, it kind of seems like, because I was out at Lake Dallas practice, unrelated to this district, but another school that chose to skip spring football and take the extra week in the fall. With the new UIL regulations, it seems like a direction that more schools might be going in, because you have the 5-day period to kind of acclimate where you can't do contact, and if you start the week earlier and skip spring, you get one more scrimmage, because Lake Dallas will scrimmage the 17th, not this Friday, but next Friday, which is a week earlier, and then say the Plano ISD schools. So a lot of coaches, I'm kind of getting the vibe from a lot, and it sounds like Gilchrist. All right, folks, sorry about that. We had some brief technical memory card difficulties. The camera obviously is not happy with us today, but
I think I was talking too much.
We're back. I believe we got to every team but Frisco Centennial, Frisco Independence, and Frisco Liberty.
Yes.
So we'll just resume with our discussion of those schools. So take it away, Brian.
Centennial made the playoffs last year. A lot of people picked them, including Dave Campbell's magazine last year, to finish dead last in the district, and they took offense to that. And when I met up with them during the first round of the playoffs, I did a story over them, beating the odds, going to the playoffs, that kind of deal. And they, every player I talked to, Coach Matt Webb, I spoke with him. They all brought up, we were picked to finish last, and we finished third. So making the playoffs, although they lost in the first round of McKinney North, making the playoffs in its own was a big achievement. Now, can they get back to the playoffs again? Kind of surprising folks. A lot of people aren't picking them to return to the playoffs. They return quarterback Weston Symes, who missed a lot of time off and on in the past 2 years to injury. He's a stud baseball player, middle infielder, and he missed the latter half of the year to injury. Luckily, Brock Floyd was able to step up there and fill in there at quarterback, who played quarterback the previous year, but he's gone. He's graduated. So now it's Weston Symes' team again. Can he lead them back to the playoffs? We'll see. Right.
And I guess moving on finally to Independence and Liberty.
So Liberty, they're kind of in that boat that Centennial was in last year. A lot of people aren't expecting them to do a whole lot this year, but they're one of the few teams in this district that actually returned their starting quarterback, and Mitchell Miller. So they have that edge over some teams. But like I said, a lot of people are picking them to finish near the bottom of the district. But who are they going to upset? Who are they going to beat? Who are they going to knock out of the playoff race? They can play spoiler, or they can take over the role that Centennial had last year and really shock the area in football and make the playoffs. So we'll see who's gonna step up and lead this team at that. But and kind of transitioning over to Independence, they have a guy that I think could win offensive MVP in this district. That some people aren't really talking about, in Logan Brungart, who 2 years ago as a sophomore, he won Defensive Newcomer of the Year as a safety. He led the team in tackles and then made the move to the offensive side of the ball. At running back, he rushed for over 600 yards this past season. He's going to be the full-time rusher in the backfield this year. Now, he's a really good athlete, really strong physical back, who I think can earn a high superlative when the season's all said and done.
Right. Well, with that, I guess we will officially conclude our discussion of the teams in this district for the second time, this time hopefully on camera. When we come back on the other side of the break, we will talk about our predicted standings. You guys alluded to maybe some controversy. We'll see, though. We'll go over some potential big games in District 5-5A Division I for this season. So all that will be on the other side of this word from this sponsor.
Today's Student Athlete Spotlight is brought to you by Bavarian Grill, authentic Bavarian food and beer garden. Listed by the Zagat survey as the highest rated German restaurant in Texas for 12 years in a row. 12 years! That's 3 presidential terms. You can enjoy traditional and authentic spring favorites now. Everything from appetizers like slow roasted ham hock and potato pancakes to entrees like bratwurst or breaded schnitzel. Bring your whole family for lunch and dinner. They are open Tuesday through Saturday, located off Parker and Highway 75 in Plano. Bavarian Grill. And now, let's get back to the podcast.
Welcome back to the Star Local Media High School Sports Podcast, to the second half of our show, hopefully uninterrupted this time, unlike the first half. We went over the teams in District 5-5A Division I, so now we'll get into just some of our thoughts on how the standings might shake out, some big games and all that sort of thing. So I guess as the reporter here that doesn't necessarily have a team that I directly cover, I'll go ahead and get my probably garbage opinions out of the way. As far as predicted standings, the only controversies for me were right there kind of in the middle. I think there's a pretty sizable playoff bubble in this district, especially considering, you think about Centennial last season, you think about, Heritage maybe taking a pretty big step forward this season. There could be some shakeup and, definitely the 4th playoff spot, maybe even potentially the 3rd and 4th playoff spot. But as somebody not super familiar with the district and the teams, I'm kind of a little more along the lines of what most people are thinking. So I have Lone Star, just de facto district champion until proven otherwise at this point. I think the Colony is their only real challenger for the top spot, and I almost wanted to put the Colony above. They bring back another team that brings back a ton of starters. I think they're very mature. I think they have some weapons, and I think the Colony is going to be very good. But like I said, I think just by default I kind of give it to Frisco Lone Star and the history and the tradition, with the caveat that maybe the Colony finds a way to upset them or win some more games, or Lone Star drops one somewhere else. But
it's also a playoff rematch from last year. Those 2 teams met in the first round. And it was actually the game was a little more competitive than the score looked. It was a pretty tight game at halftime, and then Lone Star just put it on them in the second half. But
right.
So definitely some familiarity there, as Brian mentioned, new quarterback for Lone Star, so a little different look for them. So I think that should be definitely has a chance to be the kind of de facto district title game there.
Right, yeah, and that was, I guess I'll go ahead and get to it, that was the game that I chose as kind of the big game of the year in this district. Like you said, I think it has a chance to be, the district title game. Whoever wins that game will likely end up with the championship and the trophy and the number 1 seed. So, yeah, a playoff rematch, all the drama you could want, and 2 really, really good football teams, I think, that will be playing for a lot, certainly, that night.
Watch, now that you said that, Lone Star and the Colony are both not going to make it.
Right, yeah, they'll both just miss.
That would be a story. Neither of them made it.
From there, I guess, Lone Star, the Colony in second, just behind, almost 1A, 1B with my heart, almost flipping them, but not quite. And then third, I actually have Little Elm. I think that I think they're going to be good. I think that veteran presence is a really big deal in high school football. We've talked in the first half about how they returned 14 starters from last season. So I think that consistency and experience are really huge in high school, and sometimes can kind of outrace or outlast, maybe is a better word, just pure talent. So I think Little Elm may slot into that number 3 spot, and then the number 4 spot's a little tricky. I have Wakeland there. But you've talked to me a lot about Heritage and their potential kind of big season, not a bounce back, but a step forward for sure. Centennial last year, who knows with them, because of the way that they kind of shocked the world and made the playoffs. Sometimes that can be a catalyst for continued success, even when maybe there shouldn't be as much. So I give the nod to Wakeland just kind of based on tradition, but they don't return very many starters, and who knows how things could go. I have Centennial right under Wakeland in the 5th spot. Heritage right there in the 6th spot. I could easily see that pairing flip-flop too, and Heritage finishing just on the outside looking in. And then I actually have Liberty second to last and Independence last. I think Liberty has a pretty good offense, and when you get down to the bottom like that, sometimes it's the games you get up for are the ones that could define your season when maybe you're not going to make the playoffs. And not that Liberty doesn't expect to make the playoffs, playoffs. I mean, every team goes into the season with a certain expectation, but sometimes you're a team like Liberty and you circle Independence on the calendar maybe and say, you know what, we're going to try to take a step forward. This team has gotten the best of us, or this team is predicted to finish in front of us. We're not going to finish dead last. That's going to be our personal kind of our pride thing for this season. So just for the sake of Liberty's offense and potentially having a little bit more success than they did last year, I have them second to last with Independence bringing up the rear. But that could go a lot of different ways as well. I think the theme of this district is kind of that outside of the Colony and Lone Star, things could go in a lot of different screwy directions. So I guess we'll see. So those are my predictions and my game to watch. So whoever else wants to take the baton next, I guess.
Speaking of the Colony.
Yeah. Real quick on your game to watch, I guess we should tell people when it is. That one's Lone Star, the Colony. It's kind of nice. It's going to be right in the middle of the district season there on October 19th. So both teams should be able to kind of get their bearings and kind of hopefully be hitting on all cylinders.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes when they're too early, you don't see teams, even two really, really good teams firing on all cylinders the way they should. So hopefully that's a game that lives up to the hype.
It's like the last game of the year. Things already decided. You're like, okay, they're just getting ready for the playoffs. But if it's like right in the middle, makes it for some juicy entertainment.
Well, it should be pretty entertaining in the very last week of the season when the old battle by the lake between the Colony and Little Elm goes down. So those teams, since I've been covering the Colony, I don't really recall them playing the last game of the season. So that's kind of cool that their big rivalry game is going to kind of wrap everything up. Did you cover that game last year? I can't remember, the Colony Little Elm.
I did.
That was a pretty wild one. Colony was kind of driving right in, fumbled right in the red zone with a chance to win it, right?
Yeah, it was so back and forth, and Little Elm won by 1.
Yeah, I think they took a safety to make it a close game.
It was 34-31. Little Elm had the ball deep in their own territory, purposely took the safety for better field position, and then the Colony just couldn't put it in.
So the Colony kind of had been getting the better of that series. But the last 2 years when they were in 14-5A, they split, and both of them were good games. I think 2 years ago the Colony won by 7, and last year obviously the Little Elm won 34-33, so a really good game. I think we should have another pretty good one here this year, and I don't know, I know you have pretty high expectations for Little Elm, so maybe there could be a little more on the line here than we're anticipating. So, and obviously it's going to be a big game in terms of seeding and stuff, so that's one that I'm looking forward to. And then maybe an outside shot this could be, if depending on how Lone Star kind of materializes, this could be a kind of a secondary district title type game. So I'm looking forward to this one a lot.
Are you going to go into your
You want me to predict right now?
Sure.
Okay.
Well, I'm taking the Colony to win the district. I like
pulling the trigger.
I like their balance on both sides of the ball. I like their balance offensively. They should be able to throw the ball. They should definitely be able to run the ball. If their offensive line comes together, then I think they're going to be the best team in this district, and I'm going to pick them to win it. I'll take.
That's a hot take.
I'll take Lone Star second, and then I'm going to go Little Elm third, and I'll give the edge to Wakeland for fourth ahead of Heritage. Not super familiar with these teams, but I'll pick those as my 4 teams, and we'll see how the other ones.
Before I dive into the game to watch, I want to do my standings, because you're throwing out some hot takes. My hot take is I think Little Elm beats the Colony again for the second straight year.
Yeah.
And they take second place in the district.
Okay.
Obviously, I'm got Lone Star. Barring anything crazy happening, they're going to win the district title. But I think it'll be Little Elm, and then the Colony, and then Wakeland. But Heritage is going to be right there in the mix. I've been saying it the last few weeks. That kind of leads me into my game to watch between Wakeland and Heritage. The very first game of the district season. I know I was just talking about how the first game and the last game are never the best,
right?
Or the most entertaining, based off how the teams stand at that point. But September 28th, we get a huge district showdown right from the get-go at FISD Memorial Stadium. I really think the winner of that game, albeit I believe it'll be Wakeland. The winner of that game very well could be fourth or even third in the district. So, and then from there, Heritage, and then you have a bubble of Centennial, Liberty, and Independence somewhere in that mix to round things out.
Absolutely. Well, I guess that will just about wrap up our discussion of 5-5A Division I football. Thanks for hanging out with us this week. With Matt Welch gone, you'll be back under his care next Monday for another edition of the Starlight Media High School Sports Podcast. Until then, for all 3 of us, we hope you have a good weekend, and we'll talk to you soon.